Today I'm going to sow my tomatoes. G'day there, I'm Dana from Piwakaka Valley, and today I'm going to show you how I go about sowing my tomatoes ready for summer. I'm sorry, it's quite windy here, and I was going to do this in the tunnel house, but it's noisy in there because of the wind, and the other option is outside, so we'll see how we go. The first thing I do when I'm sowing any seeds is put together a seed raising mix. Now usually I will just buy a bag of pre-made seed raising mix. Today I'm going to combine a seed raising mix and a potting mix together because I only have half a bag of both. Basically what you want, especially for those hot weather crops like your peppers and tomatoes, is you want something with some nutrients in it, but also something that drains really well. Now see, I've got a bin here and it's got a wee bit of water in it. I usually find that the potting mix is a little bit dry, so I combine the potting mix and the seed raising mix and a wee bit of water, and I tend to mix it in a bin because I find it a lot easier to scoop it out than scooping it out of a bag. People often get caught up on what brand's better, and to be honest, I'm not into which brand's better, but I have found that the really cheap stuff, my plants just didn't do well after the first couple of weeks in it. I think they must have like a fast release fertilizer, and then it seems to be too wood based after that, so it seems to suck the nitrogen out and the plants eventually suffer. Also, I found that it wasn't draining as well as I'd like, so I have splashed out and bought slightly more expensive potting mix and slightly more expensive seed raising mix, and to be honest I found them a lot better. As you can see here, they're kind of a bit more crumbly. You can see the bits of perlite or vermiculite, whichever it is, the wee stony stuff in there, and it's a lot more like smaller, it's a lot smaller pieces. It doesn't seem to clump together quite so badly, so I'm just going to mix these two together and we'll fill our trays. So I've opted for sitting on the ground because it seems to be slightly less windy down here. Now for seed trays for my tomatoes, I am using these. They're 10 inch by 20 inch. I bought them on AliExpress, honestly. They're quite lightweight. They're a bit cheap. I think they're 1.5 inch squares, I think. They look about 1.5 inch and probably about that deep as well. They might be 2 inch, but anyway, that's the sort of size that I am going for. And then I've got some 10 by 20 flats that these fit into as well, because I prefer to bottom water my seeds. The reason I like to bottom water is that these seeds are quite small, and if you're pouring lots of water in from the top, you can displace them, which means that they either float away, they might float out of the tray altogether, or you'll end up with multiple ones in one seed cell, which when you're growing different varieties in each row, having a seed drift into the wrong one is actually really frustrating. So I prefer to bottom water if I can, which means having a tray underneath that you put the water into the tray underneath rather than pouring boatloads of water in the top. The other thing is we're on tank water, which means all of our water supply comes off of our roof, which means we have a limited water supply. So this way we actually use a lot less water as well. So the next thing you need to do is fill your trays up with potting mix. I usually sit them inside the flat at the same time. It adds a little bit of extra structural integrity. And fill them up, and I like to then tamp them down just with my fingers just to make sure that the soil's nice and firm, and then top them up a little further. Mate, that wind's so strong it just blew my camera over the jolly thing. Anyway, now onto the seeds. And my tomato seeds, I usually will keep some from the year before, and I have a wee video on saving tomato seeds which I'll put up in the description the doofer up in the top there. But a lot of the seeds I'm growing this year are new varieties that I've not grown before. So I've got some seeds that I've saved myself and other seeds that I have actually bought from King's, which is kind of our local New Zealand seed place that everyone seems to buy their seeds from. The wind's making a hooer of a noise. Now, to seeds in general, you don't want to plant them too deep. So tomato seeds are very small, so all I do is sit them on the surface and put a really light dusting of seed mix over the top. And this is enough to cover them and get them germinating. The point of the cover on the top is merely to keep them moist while they're germinating, to stop them dehydrating in the sun. So usually a seed you will plant 2 to 3 times as deep as it is big. So they're quite small, so we're just going to put them on the top and put a wee sprinkle over the top, and that should be enough. Now with tomatoes, there are 2 different types of tomatoes. You can get determinate tomatoes, which will grow like a bush, and you don't tend to trim them down. You just let them do their thing, and they tend to set fruit all together all at once over the course of about 3 weeks, and then they die off. So I have a few determinate tomatoes, but the vast majority of the tomatoes I grow are indeterminate varieties. And these are the ones that tend to grow the vine that you trim down to 1 or 2 main leaders. And then they give you a harvest over pretty much all of the summer. So most of mine are those, but I have this year, I've got some Roma tomatoes here of a variety that are a determinate variety, so I want to give those a go to see how they work for me as a paste tomato. One thing that really annoys me about preserving tomatoes is having like this ongoing harvest. I'd rather they just all set at once and I got a decent amount of them and I could just preserve them all at once. So I'm going to give these Roma ones a go. And another one that I'm trying for the first time, that's the mortgage lifter. I've pre-made all the labels and they've all got tangled up. That's real helpful, eh? Another type that I'm growing for the first time is called the Subarctic Plenty, which was developed apparently for the US military. And it has a date to maturity time of only 60 days, which is almost 3 weeks quicker than most of the other ones I'm growing. So I'm really excited to give them a bash. I'm going to put some in the hothouse and I'm going to put some outside as well, which I don't usually grow tomatoes outside here. They just don't seem to do so well, and when I've got the tunnel house they do really well in there. But I am going to give it a bash, put them up the middle of quite a few of my raised beds this year and see how we get on with those. So I've got high hopes for those. So as I'm planting them, I'll talk about them and we'll just go. So these Roma tomatoes, these trays have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row. So I'm going to do 2 rows of the Roma tomatoes, giving me 10 of those. Most of the others I'm only going to do one row of. I probably have space for maybe 30, maybe 40 tomatoes in the tunnel house. So I always sow a little more seed than I need, because if the plants don't do so well, I just keep the best ones. And often I'll give them to family or friends or whatever as well. So always sow more. I mean, a seed costs barely anything, right? So I'll get these in. I'll see if I can set this camera up so it doesn't fall over. And the next tomato I've got here is mortgage lifter. I quite like these. They're a nice big slicing tomato, but I'm only going to do 5 of those because they're ones that we eat fresh, and to be honest, they're not the highest producers that we grow. I'll probably only keep 3 of these. This one's a yellow pear. I've grown it before in the past. The kids really like it. But I haven't grown it, I think, since my 11-year-old was 2 or 3. So we're going to give it a go this year. It makes a little yellow pear-shaped cherry, which is quite sweet. It doesn't lend itself to cooking quite so well, but a delicious eating one in salads and things. This one's called Artisan Blush. It's a little cherry tomato that has sort of a pink and green, I think, from memory, sort of striping on it. Oh no, I know, it's yellow and pink. And again, because this is something I've not grown before, and it's one that you just eat, I'm just going to do 5 of those. This is a new one to me as well, Tomato Ace. Apparently it's a good all-rounder sort of tomato. It's just a standard red one, and it's a really prolific producer. So I'm going to do I haven't decided, should I do 5 or 10 of those? I think I'll just do 5. Did I do that one already? Well, this one's Moneymaker. Again, it's a red slicing tomato. It's quite a big one. And I've grown it before, I just failed to save seeds this year. Now, the pink oxheart's a bit of a favourite of mine. It grows really quite large fruit that are quite good for saving, but the last few years I have found that they haven't put out a great deal on each plant, which I found a little disappointing. Really good cooking tomato though, very big meaty flesh. This one is Sweet Bite. It's a little, well, some would argue that it is the Sweet 100, but it's called something different, so I'm going to give it a sorry, that's really noisy. I'm going to give it a try growing it from seed that I've saved myself. It might not be exactly the same as the parent plant, but that's the tomato that I still have growing in the tunnel house. It's still giving me tomatoes in the middle of July, which is winter for us. Now this one is Tangella. It's one from seed that I've saved myself. It's a little round slicing yellow tomato, really delicious, very prolific. Probably one of my favourite tomatoes to grow actually would be Tangella. And I've run out of room on this tray, so on the next tray I will plant the subarctic Plenty, which is the one that I'm really looking forward to trying outside. And to finish this tray off, I'm just going to use a tiny sprinkling of dirt and just sprinkle it over the top. Now, to get good germination from tomatoes and peppers, it needs a few things. So peppers and tomatoes both need temperatures that are over 18 degrees Celsius, preferably closer to 20 to 30 degrees Celsius, which is about 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit up to about 85. Anything too much warmer than that, you'll probably start killing them as they start germinating, so not too hot. The best way of achieving this is one, either grow them inside somewhere, especially if your house is nice and warm. Or 2 is to use a heating mat, or 3 is to use a heated cable and a heater propagation table like what I've got. All of those things, especially if they can be hooked up to a thermostat to keep that temperature, the soil temperature, not just the actual mat's temperature, at the correct degrees, and they like it nice and steady 24/7. Other options are to stick them up on top of your fridge, in your hot water cylinder, cupboard, anywhere that's going to be nice and warm. They don't need light until they've germinated. Once they're germinated, you'll need to move them out somewhere that's nice and bright. Tomatoes are best to be removed from that heat after that and just kept nice and warm at a nice warm ambient temperature. Frost will kill them, but keep them nice and warm. But if you leave them with that extra heat, you'll end up with really leggy tomatoes. The other thing they will need is plenty of moisture, so I water them, I mist them either from the top, or I bottom water them so that they can soak the water up themselves from the bottom every day, just to make sure that that topsoil is still nice and moist. You don't want them to be super boggy, so if the soil's moist, don't bother watering them. You don't want them sitting in constant water So if these bottom trays, you don't want them to be full, you just want a tiny little bit of water in the bottom, just enough to be touching the bottoms of the trays so that the water can wick its way up. The plants don't need to be basically swimming in water, or you'll find that the seeds just rot when they start to grow. Given plenty of heat, these should germinate within the week and should get off to a pretty flying start. Once the plants are a little bit bigger, you are best to pot them on to move them out of the small cells. So once they're sort of 4 to 6 inches tall or 10 to 15 centimeters tall, it's a really good time to pot them on to like a 10 centimeter pot. I will do that in a few weeks when they're ready, but I won't be planting them out where they're to go until well after the last frost. But I like to give my plants a really good head start so that as soon as our summer starts to warm up properly, we're getting fruit as soon as possible. If you want more help, tips and tricks and ideas and a timetable for growing your own food, I really recommend you check out, I've got a book called The Homesteaders Guide to Seasonal Gardening, and it has all the different things that you can plant at the different seasons, tips and tricks on getting them going. There's information on harvesting, information on storing, and even some recipes in there for each of the different seasons using seasonal produce. So I'll put a link to that down in the description below. I recommend you check it out. You can get a hard copy off Amazon with it, or you can buy the ebook just through my website. Right, this is my heater propagation table. I'm going to pop the plants in here and they will go in under the plastic. The only problem within here is the cat has somehow worked out how to get in here, and she has decided to sleep on this nice warm bit which I'm about to put plants on. So I'm going to have to work out exactly how she's getting in here. I really don't know. The only hole that I can think of is up there in the vent. So I really don't know how she's doing it. But anyway, hopefully she doesn't sit all over my tomatoes and my peppers and ruin them. I just found my missing lens cap. It was in my gardening apron from last time I was videoing. Whoops. I will give you updates as these plants grow, and when we're ready I'll show you exactly how I pot them out as well. I hope you found this video really useful. If you have, hit the like button, share it with anyone that you think might find it useful. Consider subscribing to our channel. We bring you videos twice a week on growing and preserving your own food and other homesteading bits and pieces. Thanks for watching.